Hogwarts Legacy isn't holding off on the content and will likely be the game to define 2023. We just had a deep dive that showcases tons of new exciting details, from a really extensive character creator, a combat system with lots of combos and interesting spells, as well as tons of hidden secrets that we're going to cover in this video. So if you enjoy it at any point, a sub to the channel would be really appreciated, and let's dive right in. But right from the very start, I already know I'm going to spend a lot of time in the character customizer, and it already impresses with a very large selection of options. There's about 40 or so predetermined looks you can quickly select between, but you can also fine-tune the character the way you like it. There's about 15 face shapes to choose from, a skin color slider, and many other fine-tuning options, even including to the starting eyeglasses. There's about 40 hairstyle options with dozens of colors to pick between that I was able to count, and many more settings for complexion, face scars, eyebrows, and there's a lot more in there to make your perfect character. Also, we finally found out what the final tab is for, and no, it's not the screen that lets you select your house of choice. That comes actually later, and instead here is where you get to pick the voice, the pitch, and also fine-tune it the way you like it to sound. And it also gives us a glimpse into the 4 difficulty options, with the highest being the hard difficulty. But the game looks massive. As I've said, we have a deeper dive into the various castle rooms and areas with many secret locations to uncover. And one thing I really liked in the showcase was just how many students and other characters there are in many of the areas, including ones that can be seen flying on their magical brooms, so I really have to respect that attention to detail. But you can walk up to them and in many situations interact with them, but most important, for quite a number of these situations, do side quests that offer more than the main story. There were a few references of mini games from the actual lore, but not all of them will be playable, unfortunately. Like for example, Gobstones, which is part of a side quest, is only a side objective and not something you can actually do. Furthermore, according to the game's director, the story is broken down into chapters, and each one is made out of several missions, some that we can choose from. This is also one of the ways we're gonna go and take part in classes, which are a main way to provide us with many of the major tools and spells needed throughout the game. There's even a tease of the Great Hall entrance at one point in the presentation, but obviously they did not show it to avoid spoiling it. These are not the only ones that will let you take classrooms though, so there's also side classroom missions where you get to learn additional spells, things, and other stuff later on, including about your various teachers. And what's awesome is that you can be as good or as mean as you want to, even in conversations, though no word on a morality system yet. For all of this, you'll need, of course, a wizard fielding guide, which is something that we get early on in the main story. So we can see how this looks. It's basically its own menu with all of the progression related stuff. Onto the left side, it pertains to the character, like gear, inventory, talents, and collectibles, while on the right side, there's stuff like the open world map, quests, owl post, and the game settings. Meanwhile, center top is our house of choice, and on top of it, our current character level. And on the bottom side, the challenges, of which I've seen to be quite plenty. For many of these hidden objectives, we'll have to make use of a spell called Revealio when near these locations. Like in this case, the character is shown to reveal a collectible field guide page with lore, which is also part of its own challenge track that further provides XP and hopefully some other rewards. But these can also be found flying in various locations throughout the castle, and you will need to grab them if you want to store them. Now, the combat is what I'm most excited for because it looks way more complex than I initially anticipated. And there's even a dueling club at the castle that lets you either train against target dummies or pick up fights with other students to really test your skills. And we saw gameplay of a few of the spells like Leviosa and Accio, but also the pairing mechanic in just a little bit. So the basic shots, the basic normal damage attack is done by tapping R2, which is kind of like your filler moves that you will do in between the bigger spells. The major spells, on the other hand, are casted by holding R2, which then expands this diamond grid that we see on the right side of the screen, so you can tap the face buttons then and cast any of the slottable spells. We know that there's at least 20 spells we'll get from the main story and side missions, with up to 4 unlockable of these spell diamonds that we can slot spells into. And you will have access to most, if not all, of these spells in combat by simply holding R2 and then tapping the D-pad to cycle through whichever spell diamond you want, assuming of course you have them unlocked. Now, new skills and abilities also have cooldowns, and while we haven't seen any footage of the skill tree yet, we do know that there are talents in there that will affect the cooldowns and many other things related to these spells. The focus here is really comboing the major spells and taking down enemies in creative ways, but there's also an element of strategy involved, as I've said. We saw a few ones in the new reveal, like for example Leviosa and Accio, that lets you lift enemies off the ground and then juggle them up into the air, but there's also the Protego, which is actually our defensive shield. A good thing to note is that many of these spells are color-coded and fall into different categories, like damage spells, force, or even control spells. And enemies will also feature their own defenses, which often have different color variations. The reason for that is because we actually have to match the type of spell that we use on those shields to break them more efficiently. So we'll have to be smart about our spell usage, but parrying and deflecting is also very important. Parrying is done by tapping triangle at the right moment, and there's going to be a halo around our head that will pop up and become more intense as the hit is about to happen. But you can also hold triangle right after that and instead unleash a more powerful counter attack. In this footage, we can see that the counter is being able to pick random objects from the environment and then smash them into the enemies with great force, also breaking their shields. So that could be a great way to take them down a little bit faster. Now, in terms of some of the other UI and elements, L1 is reserved for the magic tools that we can brew and grow through the course of the game, though no info on that was given yet. The small eye icon is basically the essential spells. These are spells used in a very specific context, like for example Revelio, which is used to reveal certain hidden objects around the environment. The grid icon right on the other side represents where we get to slot our spells, but they did not want to show the spell slotting as the menu would like give some spoilers, so that's that. There's also like the green bar, which is obviously the HP, and next to it there's a potion for healing that we can also brew back at the castle. No indication of what the two empty bars on the top of the HP one is, but it's likely some sort of finisher move or some kind of gauge that we have to fill that then lets us unleash some more powerful ultimate-like abilities. Of course, your suggestion is as good as mine. But let's also talk finally about the open world, because this is the final thing that got me really impressed. The open world is big and it's fully explorable according to the devs. If there's a place you can see, well, it's a place you can go to. We also see how the fast travel system is a bit in action, with the full flame igniting at one point in the presentation to indicate a travel point has been discovered. We know from previous reveals that this is basically how we're gonna travel between like all the locations in the big open world a little bit faster, and I believe it's going to take advantage of the PS5 technology given how this presentation was on the PlayStation 5. There's also a day and night cycle and also a season system with changing weathers and periods every so often, so this is going to be reflected both in the environment but can also be seen from inside the houses, with the windows changing and like the scenery outside also being visibly different. It all looks very exciting so far. I cannot wait to play the game, and of course we're gonna look out forward to more coverage here on this channel. And also of course for God of War Ragnarok, if you want to see it, there's a lot of videos that I already posted in the past few days. Thanks so much for watching though, and I'll see you guys in the next video.